shape the head of my character, in this video, we'll be discussing using the masking options further, and also how to adjust our DynaMesh project settings to allow for clean surfaces for sculpting. So let's use the masking brushes, and let's try and pull out the hammerhead shape with masking and the move brush. First, let's paint in a mask here at the top. In this case, I want to take the masked portion and pull outwards. So I need to inverse the mask to focus on this particular area. Let's press and hold Control on the keyboard and click once on the canvas to inverse. Or we can press Control-I on the keyboard. With the move brush, let's make a larger draw size for this brush and pull outwards. And as you can see, we can easily pull and stretch without affecting the base shape at the top. Now let's go in and clear the mask by pressing and holding Control and drag the cursor on the canvas. By letting go of our cursor, we can clear the mask. So we can now go in with the mask cleared and smooth the transition at the base here from the portion that we've pulled out, and now continue to rotate around the mesh to shape and refine from all different angles. So we've progressed far enough to get most of the shapes here, but I want to sort of go in on the end pieces here and start to make this more of a bulbous shape where we're going to put the eyes. But you'll notice on the sides of the mesh here, we're starting to get what looks almost like stretching happening with our surface. So I'm going to go in and scale into this area to take a closer look to see what's happening. Now I'll switch to the clay buildup brush and let's try to sculpt on this area. So you can see that the surface texture of the brush doesn't apply as well. If I go down closer to the base here, you'll see that the texture of the brush is still holding. So why is that? Well, first, we can take an even closer look at the surface of our mesh by turning on the polyframe of the mesh here. The polyframe mode will allow us to see the topology of the surface and clearly visualize how we're pulling the topology of the mesh. As it gets further away from the base, we're starting to lose sculpting resolution. In order to fix this, we're going to use what is called DynaMesh. So the DynaMesh Project 128 that we've been loading from Lightbox comes pre-loaded with the DynaMesh mode enabled. So you're wondering at this point, what is DynaMesh? DynaMesh is a feature in ZBrush that will remesh the surface at our command, which will allow us to add volume to the clay by stretching out details or laying down digital clay with our sculpting brushes, and then going in and remeshing the surface. So to investigate further, let's navigate to the DynaMesh subpalette. Now, because we're in need of actually modifying the geometry itself, let's click once on the geometry subpalette to open this up and take a closer look. And here in the middle, we have a DynaMesh tab. If we click this open, you'll see the large DynaMesh button here. Now, when highlighted orange, this means that the DynaMesh mode is enabled. So you may be wondering at this point, if DynaMesh is already enabled within this project, why hasn't anything happened through the sculpting process so far? Well, although DynaMesh is enabled, it requires us to tell it when to DynaMesh the surface. So let's go in and do our first DynaMesh. To DynaMesh the surface, press and hold the Control key. For those on the Macintosh, press and hold the Command key and drag your cursor on the canvas. Be sure to drag on the canvas and not on the mesh, which, if you remember, will apply a mask with the rectangle option to the mesh. When using the Control-Click-Drag action to re-DynaMesh, always remember that this is the same action of clearing a mask. With a mask on the surface, this action will first clear the mask, and we will need to redo the same action and Control-Drag on the canvas to re-DynaMesh the surface. And you can see that the mesh will update and DynaMesh the surface. So if you couldn't see that from this vantage point, let's go in and press Ctrl-Z to undo the DynaMesh, and let's get closer to the mesh, and we'll make sure that polyframe is enabled to see this process more clearly. Now again, press and hold Control, and we'll drag on the canvas, and by letting go of our cursor, we'll DynaMesh the surface. So now you can see more clearly how DynaMesh is looking at the entire surface, and it rebuilds this surface to add more resolution for sculpting, also while maintaining the shape that we have initially pulled out from the mesh. So I'll go back and turn polyframe option off, And let's go in and try sculpting with our clay brush again. We can first go in and maybe use the smooth brush to smooth out some of these surfaces. Now the most important part is that we have a new remesh surface that's better for sculpting. So with more resolution in this area, if I go in with the clay buildup brush, the brush details are nice and clean and perfect for continuing to sculpt our character. One last comment about DynaMesh is the resolution slider. So if we go back to the DynaMesh options, here we have a resolution slider which is set to 128. So remember, when we originally loaded the DynaMesh 128 project, this project is essentially loading a sphere and automatically activating the DynaMesh mode while setting the resolution slider to 128. Now, the most important thing to take from this is the higher we set the resolution slider, the more details we can achieve with our sculpting brushes. At this stage, this resolution is more than enough for us to continue sculpting, and then DynaMesh if we need to. And we're going to be continuing to work with our resolution settings as we get further into the sculpting process later in this series. Thanks for visiting Z Classroom. I'll see you in the next video.